Thank you, Christina, for that introduction. In case any of you are wondering, you can look at my strengths. I have all the thinking themes in there. That's where the engineering shows up, okay? So I'm just going to start this off with a little story. So about a year ago, I'd met with a nurse. She works at one of the NHS Trust hospitals, and she works in a COVID ward. We got talking about our lives, about what we do professionally. We started talking. I told her a lot about Gallups research, the findings we have, particularly when it comes to leadership. And she started sharing some stories of her own, and one of them struck a chord with me and stayed with me. And I decided I'm going to share it with you all today. So she reflected back on a moment during, in the midst of the pandemic. This was at a time where she remembered this one elderly gentleman being admitted, and he was in a very critical condition. He didn't have any parents, any family, anyone allowed to visit him. And he'd keep asking her, he'd keep looking at her and keep asking her every day, will I die alone here? She never knew what to say back to him. And then one fine day, he was taking his last breath. And in that moment, she just left what she was doing, sat down next to him, held his hand, and whispered in a very quiet voice, I am here. You are not alone. And then she said this to me. That was not medicine, Mona. That was leadership. That day, that conversation and that moment changed everything for me about how, we see numbers, we see data, we see call outs of leadership, we see a lot of research about it. But when you think about how it gets experienced, how you convert that from just insight into something that's practical, something that's lived, you actually see how it translates into emotions. In that moment, that nurse was able to show that patient one hope, was able to show him that the next few minutes will be better than the last few minutes that he's been living. Two, compassion. She showed that in his deepest moment of vulnerability, she was there for him. Three, she showed that she could be trusted in the last few minutes of his life. And four, she gave him a sense of stability, calmness right before the end. Those are the four key needs of followers that even Gallup has discovered. And today's session is going to be all about understanding a lot more deeper about what those four needs of leaders say to you and how you can translate that to the leaders who you support in your work. I have one question that I want each of you to reflect on, if possible, at the end of today's session. When you think about your lives, when you think about the people around you, who is looking at you and asking you, with or without the use of words, am I alone in this? And what's your response going to be? I really want to leave you with that reflection thought, build on it as we go through today's research. On that note, I'm actually going to begin with it. Gallup's been around for 90 years. In these 90 years, we've done a lot of research in the space of employees, workplaces, leaders, customers. We've tried to understand various needs. What is it that shareholders are expecting from us? But here's the truth. Simply put, leaders are expected to do two things. One, mobilize people and drive a sense of purpose. That's kind of why we spent all that time, right before this, discussing purpose in such great depth, right? It's an expectation, a core expectation from leaders. Two, they're expected to drive performance, metrics. No way to beat around the bush about this. These are the two core expectations that we have from our leaders. And of course, you make that happen by making the right decisions, by mobilizing your people, and so on, right? But to drive leadership, we think of the need for three things to exist. One is a very deep understanding of self. I think you had a wonderful question about people not taking the time, right, in their lives to reflect on themselves. So that's really what we need leaders, effective leaders, do. They take the time out, they're self-aware, and they're able to apply that to build on their strengths. It's a craft, they practice it. They understand the needs of their role. This is not all fluffy. There is going to be an element of competence. There is going to be an understanding of what shareholders, customers expect of leaders that needs to be fulfilled. And so certainly there is a bit about that. You need to know what's expected of you, what your demands are. And lastly, you need to understand the needs of your followers. There's no two ways about it. Those four things that I described that particular nurse doing, you need to do that and demonstrate it. And it's a discipline. A lot of times people tell me, oh, it's all theoretical, it's conceptual. I'm like, no, it's a skill, you build on it. And we'll talk through how. Now, before we carry on, a lot of people feel uncomfortable when we talk about followership, followers. And I know most of the sort of literature out there, the studies on leadership, interview the leaders, ask them for their perspectives, interview the customers, but very little actually looks at followers. And so for those of you in this room today questioning me, going, but followers, it's more of like it's something on social media, it's more for influencers, it's not really something that leaders need to necessarily think about. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Unless you deeply understand what your followers expect of you, it's really going to be hard for you to understand what it takes to be a good leader. Because what you tend to follow is ultimately what will help drive you to be a different leader. What is it that you follow? What is it that's driving you? Is it a sense of fulfillment? Is it a sense of self? Is it a sense of altruism? Is it a sense of service? Is it more self-serving? It doesn't matter. Understanding that helps you discover what it is that you're ultimately looking at and reflecting to the people around you. So really, we did this research and we had some questions, but before we get to it, I want all of us to take a moment, okay? Take a moment and think and write down, if you have a paper or something in front of you, the name of an individual, a leader who's influenced you very positively in your life. And I want you to think about 2-3 words that come to mind when you describe that person. Can you take a moment and do that? I feel like some people have got it. I'd like to hear a couple of answers if possible, please. Would any of you like to volunteer your answer for me?
A leader came to mind, and this person is extremely positive, but not toxic positive. Gently pushes and nudges without being too demanding. And then the third one is also takes the time to fight my battles. He makes my battles his battles.
Makes your battles his battles. Beautiful. Any other thoughts, anyone? Please start. Lady in white.
Yeah, trust. So trusting and both ways. Drive.
Drive.
And support. So very much to the gentleman's point over there, somebody that's got your back.
Someone who's got your back. Fabulous. We did precisely this, right? Gallups research, we asked exactly these 2 questions. Who's the leader who's had a positive influence on your life? What words come to mind? And people listed out several words very similar to the ones we've heard. I'm sure some of your words would be captured. And what we did is we ran the research, looked at all of these words and categorized them into various groupings, built attributes, analyzed, we used a lot of AI behind the scenes. And I just want to mention that this research initially was actually carried out for about 10,000, a population of about 10,000 people in 2005. It was done in a Gallup panel and then repeated again in 2008, where we expanded the research to cover 10 countries. And in 2024, we've redone this research to cover 56 countries. And I just want to clarify, we're talking roughly 76% of the world's population and 86% of the total GDP. So really, this leadership and the depth to which it's representing the human emotion and human needs is global in nature. It's something that we've seen as being more universal. And I'll talk to any differences that we see across regions as well. I'd mentioned the attributes. We had some beautiful kind of descriptions of trust, support, right? All of that described to us. These are some that we'd ended up seeing under the 4 buckets that I'd already mentioned to you. When it comes to hope, people described the need for having clarity of vision, believing that tomorrow is going to be better than today, right? Almost having words like learning, growth, all of that summarized within it. Compassion was more about, is it that I'm sensing a sense of wellness? Are we also listening to words about altruism, about service? All of this gets combined within that. With trust, it was more about, are my leaders approachable, right? That's what I'm looking to hear and gather. Is there really, a sense of collaboration and teamwork that tends to get, kind of attracted to by those leaders? Do they ask for support? So you get a lot of those kinds of attributes and words described within it. And with stability, it was more to do with accountability, responsibility, sense of structure. These were the kinds of words that got bucketed within that. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what people expected and then get to the actual definitions of this. So when you think about these 4 needs and attributes, this is how we ended up defining them. To begin with, when it comes to hope, it's the need for having a sense of enthusiasm about what lies ahead, positivity about the future. When it comes to compassion, it's about feeling cared for, feeling that someone's listening to what you have to say, right? Valuing who you are. Trust is about the need for having honesty, respect, integrity, really something that you value when it comes to what you listen to from a leader, authenticity, right? That's what sometimes is often described as a need from a leader. And the last bit is stability. When times are tough, how do I feel about it? Do I feel a sense of psychological safety to express my thoughts? These are really some of the desires that individuals, all of us have when it comes to what we expect from our leaders. Now, many of you may ask me, okay, when all this is wonderful, but which one matters the most? How do I focus on four things? That's a lot. We've come to actually understand that 56% of all of those attributes spoke to the topic of hope. And this was actually surprising. We, all of us guessed stability might show up, in the top in terms of what people are looking for, trust. But actually, it was hope. Hope was the number one expectation that people have from their leaders of tomorrow, of today. And this outranks the next, which is at trust, which is at 33%. So really, there's something here about people seeking a need for a brighter tomorrow, a better future. And so we'll delve deeper into what it actually takes to drive a sense of hope. I mentioned this earlier, but there is a universality to this. So when you look at it, yes, 56% in total of all the attributes described work linked to hope. But this is the case irrespective of which country people lived in, of those 56 included in our study. Whether you're based in APAC or Europe or Latin America or wherever, it didn't matter. Everywhere you see that, over 50%, a large majority seem to still want that sense of hope. The same is true even for the remaining elements. So you'll see that trust somewhere in the 30s, about a third of all the people said that that's what they expect and need. And then if you look at the last two, which is compassion and stability, it's minor percentages, but certainly still got some form of representation. So this is just for all of us to get a sense of what it is that we universally want, expect, require, and ask for from our leaders. I think I wanted to highlight this also because I think a lot of us kind of go, oh, but how, hope is, it's very hard. It's a feeling. How do you generate that? How do you make that happen? And to them, I always say it's a discipline. We need to change our thinking about what hope is. It's something that you can create, you can start to make happen simply by using the right words, by having the right kinds of actions and having specific thoughts that can help drive that. And I think the strengths application is a beautiful way to then start to create that hope. I'll start talking to it in a moment. Any thoughts or questions before I go ahead? Any surprises? Please.
Not surprised, but like, how can you give hope?
So, Haimona, how can you, as leaders, how can you increase hope for people, since it's very important, right? All across the world, and the times we're living in
Yeah.
are not very stable, but as we see, stability is like 5%. So what kind of advice can you give to leaders to instill that hope in people?
I love this. I didn't get your name, sorry. Marco, I didn't get, I think you perfectly set it up for me to cover the rest, the remaining part of today's presentation. I'm going to ask if you can put a placeholder there. I promise you we're going to cover that topic. Okay. I'm going to focus on how do you activate it, make it happen. But I think I'll talk to a little more in terms of broader statistics that we also found. Now, before we delve into, okay, how do we make hope happen and how do we ask leaders to do it, I think it's worthwhile knowing, that first question I asked you all, which is, who do you think of when I ask you to think of a leader who's had a positive influence in your life? It's interesting. Even if you look at the working population, 44% of them tend to think of someone from their personal life, from their family, right? But what's also interesting that managers, a leader in the organization, and colleagues, so combined, all of these get a representation of 34. So someone, an organizational figure, I'm going to say, gets the next highest ranking of 34. So really, people in an organization do play a key role. It's almost as important as a family member or a friend or someone you treasure in your personal life. And that role of fulfilling your need, fulfilling those needs of followers are everyone's responsibility, not just that of an organizational leader. It includes your managers, it includes colleagues, and how we show up, what we say, the words we say, the way we articulate our feelings. So that's, I'm just going to talk about how this is a shared responsibility. And it's the reason why I opened up with that question of what will we do when someone asks us that question about, am I alone in this? And what kind of response are we going to give? So really, it is back to this. Let's understand our collective responsibility here. think there was I want to just put forth, while all this is wonderful and important, I have to show you the grueling truth, right? Which is it doesn't exist today, not as much as we'd like to see. We just see that 15% of employees strongly agree that their leadership makes them enthusiastic about the future. It's as if we learned something during COVID. We learned to be compassionate and we forgot how to do it. We see that half as many employees say that my organization cares about my well-being as they did during COVID times. So it's as if we forgot. And then, of course, when it comes to trust and to stability, we have issues there. We just see what 1 in every 5 employees is saying that they trust their leaders, and 1 in every 10 saying that they're confident that their leaders will help them navigate changes in the future. So really, it's quite a sad story that I'm painting for you of how people feel. These are important to us. These are important to us as followers, but it's not something that we're doing enough of in order to make us feel enthusiastic about how we show up, following those individuals with a great deal of passion, creating that sense of purpose, and driving those performance which those leaders care about. It's time to change that, right? And to your amazing question, Margot, we need to make that happen, right? And oftentimes, I get asked by clients I support, and it will say, "What's the business case?" So when all this is great, but it's too soft. Who cares? What's in it for me? What's in it for the organization? And to you, I just want to say, there's a lot in it for the organization and for you, right? So it's not good stuff. It's not altruism. It's just not something we're doing for service. This has wonderful outcomes. When you focus on driving hope, that 56% that people care about so deeply, right? You're actually able to see engagement driven 21 times more than otherwise. If you actually see compassion, it drives outcomes like retention. I've pulled out just retention, don't get me wrong, it drives a lot else. I've just pulled out the one statistic to help bring this to life a little bit for us. When you think about trust, I actually have another one which is interesting here. When an individual say that they trust their organization, right, their likelihood of being engaged is 1 in every 2. When an individual says that they don't trust the leaders of their organization, their likelihood of being engaged is 1 in every 12. That's how much. So it's a 6-fold decline or increase, depending on what you want to see, that you'd actually see when individuals trust their leaders. So it matters. And we know engagement drives productivity at the end of the day. We know companies care about retaining their people. It costs to retrain. It creates business discontinuity. And let's not forget, there is also an element of well-being. Gordon spoke about this. It matters, right? When leaders communicate with a certain sense of creating calm and stability and transparency, we do see that individuals complaining about burnout drops. We see that people tend to report much lesser of it than otherwise. So really, there's a business case to focusing on these items. I've picked out specific bits to it. There's so much statistics to back this up. Let's try and do a little bit more, a little bit harder, okay? And here's the sad truth of it, right? All leaders, all of us, tend to kind of operate in a little isolated bubble, right? Our experiences at work are so much more positive than that of managers or employees. That's a sad truth. And I think it's time for us to hold up that mirror and ask ourselves, what do we want to do differently? Because if you look at it, as leaders, we're more engaged than managers and employees. We're thriving, where our well-being is far better than that of employees and managers, right? We don't report as much burnout. We certainly don't think we're going to leave immediately. And we're much more likely to recommend the organization as a great place to work. So really, as leaders, we think, like, we have those rose-tinted glasses on and we think the world is amazing. We create, such sense of followership. We're doing what we need to do. The organization is where it should be. But here's the truth, right? There's so much more that we need to start to work on and focus on, right? And so I just wanted to give you that case. Yes, these are the wonderful 4 things we need to work on. Those are the reasons why. And here's the reality of how our perceptions may be very different from that of someone else in our business. And now let's get into the how, right? Which is kind of Margot's question for us. How do we build hope? And I love this particular quote. So I just want to give you a bit of background. This individual, Dr. Lopez, who used to be a Gallup tribe member, she left with us a very rich legacy of her research in this domain of hope. And she went on to author a book which is about making hope happen. And I love this quote that you're seeing on your screen right now because it talks to 2 things. A sense of optimism that, of course, hope helps provide. But it also talks to the fact that you have agency to make it happen. And that's the beauty of it, right? Hope isn't an abstract, something that you can't do. You can actually deliver it. And here's specifically how we can go about creating hope. It requires four things. Think of these as building blocks, okay? Start with goals. You need to have an ambition. What does the future look like? Whether you're an individual or a leader, whether you're thinking about this through your own lens or that of an organization, what is my future? What are my ambitions? What are my goals? What do I want? Is it aligned with what I'm looking to drive in my business, right? Define those goals. Then get into the point of actually sharing ideas. Where are we today? Where do we aspire to be? How do we bridge that? What are the contingencies we need to have in place? What are some of the barriers that I see existing today? How do we bridge all of it? How do we bridge those aspirations with where we are today? Create a plan. Then you need to have energy. And to this, I always ask people to ask themselves, who or what helps to drive you? Focus on that. Surround yourself with that. Read more of that. Do more of that. Find ways to motivate. Find ways to motivate others. Align to a sense of purpose. All of this gives us energy. And lastly, don't be quiet about it. We need to get vocal. We need to communicate. We need to articulate that those goals, that vision, those ideas, those plans, that energy. Make it known to others around you. Create that sense of optimism. Of course, be real about what can be achieved, but drive a sense of enthusiasm about what lies ahead. And make people realize you have the agency to make it happen. Tell yourself that, right? This is really how we can go about creating hope. I don't want to just talk about Gallup data and not bring strengths in, because that is ultimately what unites us all today in the room, right? When we asked Don Clifton, our father, years and years ago, who built positive psychology, built the philosophy of strengths, he had this amazing quote. He said, the more you do what you do best at, the more hopeful you tend to be in life. Simply by focusing on your strengths, developing it, you are more hopeful. You are more hopeful that you'll be a better person. You are more hopeful that you will be able to achieve the dreams and ambition that you've set out for yourself. You are more hopeful about what lies ahead and the influence that you can have. So really focusing on your strengths is certainly one lever for you to think about. I'm moving on from here to kind of have a whistle tour covering the other three topics as well, right? But I wanted to bring up, compassion through some examples. So again, I want to get you all talking to me. And again, let's not take too much time. I want all of you to just very quickly reflect on a moment, or maybe a time where you were the recipient of great deep compassion. I want you to describe how that made you feel and any words that come to mind that kind of describes the response, around that whole how did it make you feel. Would any of you like to share with me? I see someone in the corner there. Should go for it. Values. Okay, you feel valued. Fantastic. Safe. Fabulous. Sorry. Heard and seen. Fantastic. Fantastic. These words are just the most beautiful description and actually helps me bring to life the definition we have for compassion. So when we look at it, right, it's more about an emotional response. It is things like the words you guys are describing about feeling safe, feeling valued, heard, seen. It is about making sure that when someone is experiencing a sense of suffering, you're helping to alleviate that. You're helping them to feel safe, to feel heard, to feel valued, to feel seen, right? It's almost an authentic need for you to be able to support that individual in that moment. It's emotional. It comes from deep within. And when we looked at attributes used to describe compassion, words like love, caring, friendship featured in it. So I do want to say that this is something that's highly emotional. And I don't want anyone in this room thinking, I know Christina made a joke earlier about, empathy 33, what do I do about it? I can't be compassionate. Not at all. We need to start thinking about this more as a skill, right? Compassion is something we can bring it all to life simply by working hard at it. And I'll give you a little model that I think works perfectly at bringing this to life. And also just how do you surround yourself then with the people who have the higher empathy, who have the other, kind of maybe she has higher relator and she can leverage that. So I don't want you to think of your strengths in a limiting way to bring any of these to life. I'm going to skip this, it's in the statistic, but I think what I do want to talk about here is a very lovely model that was brought forth. This is not a Gallup model, but a behavioral scientist who we deeply kind of admire. And this is, it's a beautiful, it's a model you can almost rely on these moments where someone is experiencing or expressing to you an emotional situation that they've been in and you don't know how to react back. This is kind of a formula I'm going to suggest you can think of. First, believe in something called global listening. What I mean by global listening is it's not about just listening to the words someone says or someone speaks. It's more about what emotions are they actually trying to tell you through their gestures, through their words. Try and feel what they have to say. Don't try and listen with the goal of responding to it. Just listen so that you understand what it is that they're putting forward. The next bit is more about reflect back, acknowledge what that person has just told you, right? Start to think, okay, this is what this person has described, articulate it back to them. Try and see if you feel that. Do you feel what they are experiencing along with that individual? And then, of course, ask poignant questions. And this brings us to the part of response. Here, acknowledging the individual, their emotion, their experiences is the first step to it. But rather than slapping solutions on their face, I think maybe it's helpful for us to talk about, okay, how is it that we can constructively asking them, those beautiful coaching questions that I don't have to train anyone in this room to then, gather out of the individuals you're speaking to. How is it that we can actually listen and address the issue that's at hand? And these are those moments where I always say language is so important. Is so important. What we communicate is so important, right? Rather than telling someone, how are you doing today? Asking them, how are you feeling today, would actually make a big difference, because then you're listening, you're trying to understand those emotions and trying to put back to them, what is it that we can do to make you feel differently, right? Those actions, guiding them to those actions. So there are a lot of these models, and this is one such that we can use to start to show compassion, even with empathy in our number 33, right? I love this quote. I had to kind of bring in a mix of people who were getting quotes from. And this one was Warren Buffett. And he spoke about trust is like the air we breathe, right? When it's not there, no one cares. But the minute it's absent, everyone notices. So I think that's the truth about trust. It's hard. It's hard to achieve, but it's possible. And I'm going to give tips. These are specifically focused on leaders and what leaders can do about building a sense of trust. Okay, and I'm going to be a whistle stop tour again for us. I think to begin with, leaders need to role model. This goes back to, I think, Miriam's description of having a 2-year-old, right? You suddenly realize that your words matter so much lesser than your actions. And that's the truth about even us as adults. When we look at our leader doing something, even if they say something else, we watch what they're doing and follow that. So they've got to be better role models. If they expect something to be done, they need to start doing it themselves. That's number one. That's how you build trust. We know it's not empty words as a result. Second, we want transparency, candor, especially when times are tough, when bad news has to be delivered. We really want people to put it as it is. We also want leaders to admit flaws when they have them, if they have them. That shows a sense of vulnerability. You trust them more as a result. And lastly, it's also about when you become a leader, not forgetting the fact that you need to now learn to trust others to do a job better than you ever have. So, how do you do that? How can you build the humility in yourself to believe that the individuals who are now doing your old job are going to do it better than you? How do you drive that? How do you encourage that? Look for answers within your strengths. But really, this would be the foundations of how you can actually think of building trust. I wanted to cover stability really quickly for you all through a little example. So let me just ask, show of hands here, how many of you have been in an aeroplane that has had some form of turbulence? Fabulous. Okay, shout it out loud for me. Who do you look at to gain reassurance that this is okay? Pilot. Huh? You can see the pilot. That's a privilege. The rest of us, the rest of us rely on just the flight attendants, don't we? Yeah. And come on, when those flight attendants smile, we're like, oh, it's fine. Everything's okay. It's under control. We're not dying. This is okay, right? You are that flight attendant to your employees. Your leaders are those flight attendants to your employees, especially when they experience workplace turbulence. Let's accept that. And it's hard. It's hard to smile as that flight attendants through the turbulence while you're also nervous. And I appreciate that we're all human. But there is a truth to how we need to demonstrate this, right? Maintaining calm is really important when others are not in a state of calm. And again, I wanted to bring forth a model of how perhaps we could think about doing this. How do you do this? How do you stay calm when in your head you're that flight attendant also freaking out about how bad this is, right? Wearing your high heels, pushing your whatever you're pushing, and all of that stuff. So I think firstly, we need to own our negative emotions. And again, this is another model. And before we get to this, actually, been sharing this with Jeremy right before our session. There is a professor in Harvard University, and she talks specifically about, so her name is Susan Davis, and she talks about how always say, I am feeling anxious. Never say I am anxious, because what ends up happening is the minute you say I'm feeling anxious, you're always creating a bit of a distance between that anxiety, between that emotion and yourself. You're not making that emotion who you are. So that's really the first step to it. So ask yourself, what am I feeling? It's not who you are, what you're experiencing. What am I feeling today, right? Then, of course, think about why you're feeling it. Why are you feeling it in this moment? Is there a reason behind this? And then, of course, why is it important? Should I trust it? Because sometimes we can tend to overreact. Sometimes we don't have the facts in front of us, right? It might have felt like a terrible turbulence. Was it? Right? The pilot may actually be calm in there in his co-pilot, in his wonderful little cockpit, right? And so the last bit is, what do I do next? Only when you have your answers to the first three, get to a moment of responding. That's really what I'm going to suggest. So own your negative emotions, conquer it, ask yourself, what am I feeling? And then arrive at the what do I do next? Ideally, maintaining candor, creating hope in the midst of a difficult, turbulent time is really the role of a leader. Okay. I'm going to kind of close off with a round of Q&A, but before that, I just wanted to talk through and remind us the role of leaders is about creating performance and purpose, right? I spoke about the need to focus on three different things: strengths application, needs of followers, and understanding the demands that are there of your role. I'm going to skip this bit completely for us, but then I want to end it with, how can you activate on this? How can you actually bring your strengths to life to live those four needs of followers? So let's do a little exercise. I'm going to love if any of you could share at the back of it. Think of those four needs of followers: hope, compassion, trust, and stability. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Then ask yourself, which one do you want to focus on right now? That may not be the one that gets in the bottom scores, okay? So whichever it is that you care about right now. Then ask yourself, which Clifton strength is going to help you and how? And finally, commit to one action item. The more specific, the better. Give it a deadline, give it a date, something that you know you can actually end up doing at the back of the session. Ideally, frame this around that question I opened with. What do you want to say to that person right beside you saying, am I alone in this? How do you want to respond back to them? How will you live that particular need for that individual? Is anyone ready to share? Please, get on the mic.
Hey again. I would think that I would focus on hope, because this is what I see in my day-to-day conversations with colleagues or with coaches, that it is a big enabler for them to be energized and have a path forward. So as it's the most effective, that's the one I would put first. Using my Clifton strengths, I would use individualization, which is the second, then ideation based on what feedback I got, because I try to get a lot of inputs to build a path for them. So that's what I would say. And for the action item, I think in the future coaching session that I have in 2 days, I'm trying to make this more specific with one of my coaches.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Please.
I actually feel like it's somewhat of a parenting course because it makes me think of my kids. And I would like to lead them in compassion. I would use then my individualization and learner to actually be curious and learn at their level. Where are they at? Who are they? And how can I just give them space to be them?
can hear that individualization coming across beautifully. Thank you for that. Anyone else, maybe on this side? I'm making eye contact with you. I feel like you want to talk. Person in blue. Yeah? Yeah?
The one for me that shines out as well is the hope, because it's the one that's obviously very needed.
Yes.
And I think I have a bias to that because I have positivity as my number one strength. So it's something that comes naturally, I think, in the conversations I have. So infusing that more deliberately throughout the conversations I've got lined up.
Fabulous. Thank you. Okay, just want to check time. Are we good? We're good. Fabulous. Anyone else at this side? Do you want to go? Daniela? Do you want to go?
Thanks, Mona. And yeah, I resonate a lot with that last comment as well. Positivity is my number two. What really made me reflect is many times positivity is not even perceived as a strength. And the fact that through our strengths, we can really be who we are and embrace who we are to have the highest impact really does make me focus on hope as the one I'd like to bring forward, and in my next coaching conversation, engage my positivity to help my coachee connect with their own brand of hope, however they get to it. As you were saying, whether they have it at number 1 or at number 34, there is a way for them to get to hope. And my positivity can help me get them to their own version of hope.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Daniela.
I have one online that said, compassion, belief. I'm going to make time to slow down, invite input, listen, and demonstrate compassion, and then try to cast vision for future, which is optimistic and hopeful.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Abby. I think this was wonderful. Thank you all so much. If there's no one else looking to share right now, I am going to invite a little bit of questions. I hope I answered yours. You feel so? Okay. Anyone else with any questions or thoughts on all that I've presented today? We have one gentleman ready right now.
You know, on slide 14, you have this, you don't have to flick through those. It was
Okay.
about how to create hope. Yeah? And one of the first one is about setting goals, direction, and so on. And this is something that I and other people in our organization wrestle quite a lot with.
Yeah.
And the reason is we are a quite large organization divided into many multiple geographies and countries and so on. So usually what you see in these specific countries and markets is that the board of management, they are themselves struggling because it's always turbulent, always changing. There also you find that they're also wrestling with providing a direction. By the time it trickles down and cascades and you're working with, I don't know, board minus 3 leaders, how do you help them to create hope? Yeah, because it's so, there's confusion at all levels. If you want to find an answer or clarity at the top, it's never going to happen. So in this kind of chaotic environment, how do you coach and help these mid-management leaders to also create this sense of hope and purpose within the team? This is something I wrestle with it on a regular basis.
I just love that question. I feel it almost makes me reflect back on that slide, if you remember, where I showed us who is it that we look at when we describe a leader, right? We're not necessarily just saying it's the CEO or whatever, the executive team. Sure, they matter. They contributed to that 34% of individuals in an organization who we drive that sense of needs of followers from. But it's not the only, right? Managers, your peers, literally your colleagues also contributed to it. So somewhere I would actually say, let's take the burden of fixating on, just the top leadership as something they need to do to deliver on hope. It's something that's everyone's responsibility. It's something that everyone can actually help other individuals with. So I'm going to say, try and think about sharing these kinds of insights, creating that sense of hope, giving practical ideas, and coaching individuals irrespective of whether they're in management positions or not. Go ground up. So bottom up rather than top down is really what I'm going to suggest. And when you think about the goals and the vision element of it, yes, it's better if it comes from the top because it is about, a future, the direction. But I also say When you think about engagement, it's very personal, right? I'm engagement and motivated to do what I am doing best. I think about my sense of purpose and how that connects to the big picture of the organization. So I always say when you think about goals and vision, it doesn't have to be about, okay, what our big business is going to do in the next 5 years. What am I doing to help the organization do what it's defined that it wants to do in the next year? How am I going to input that? So make it personal. I think the more we make that ambition ours and own it, I think the more personal and the more real it becomes for us to live it. Please.
Just going to slide 25, you had followership. That's a word I've not come across before.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what Gallup are discovering about that?
I'm going to say this entire presentation is all about followership, right? When we think about followership, it is about what is it that we're looking for and expecting from our leaders, and how can leaders look to create individuals who want to listen to what they have to say. So really followership is, it's almost as if we're reversing it, right? Leadership is where you look at that one individual and look at what they're looking to be, whereas followership is about creating that sense of influence within an organization where you mobilize teams and people to make things happen. So really, I'm going to say it's a terminology, but it's really all about living these 4 needs of followers, looking for it, making it happen every day. But great observation. I like that. I think please, one last question, Meera.
Thanks for the session. First, you mentioned engagement in the previous question. How do you see any overlap between the 4 needs or attributes with the Q12 pyramid and the pillars inside?
It's a great question. I actually see there's a lot of link between them. So if you think about hope, right? You think about that vision, that sense of the future, it's always aligned to a sense of personal purpose. What am I doing? So if you think of Q8, our 8th question, which is the mission and purpose of my organization, makes me feel my job is important. So it's all about that, right? Am I hopeful about what I'm doing? So I'm going to say that's a clear link we observe there. Compassion is very close to the care items. So question Q5, which is my supervisor, someone at work seems to care about me as a person. When it comes to the others, which is around trust and stability, I'm not going to say there's one particular item that shouts to it, but it's almost a combination of it. It's almost, I think with stability especially, it's those items which are at the bottom of the pyramid. So you think about, I have expectations, clarity of expectations, I have materials, all of this is important when you think about needing to be able to manage, especially during times of disruption, right? And with trust, it's the other way around. One is you trust your manager, your leader, do they care for you? Second is, are you trusting your coworkers when it comes to delivering on quality? So we see a combination of a few items really in our Q12 pyramid that render to that sense of trust, because there are various individuals you're looking at when it comes to talking to it. Did that help? Fab. Okay, I think we're going to call it a wrap, but thank you all for being such a great audience. Thank you.